Welcome to Shatter.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. My happiness isn't your responsibility, she said, looking me dead in the eye like she was reading a quote off a self-help blog. Then she turned away, calm, collected, like she hadn't just pulled the last brick out of a crumbling wall. I didn't answer. Not right away. Because what do you say when your own wife looks at you like a burden? I'd asked a simple question. Something like, do you want to go for a walk? We hadn't done anything together in weeks. I just wanted 20 minutes, some kind of connection. And she gave me that line. That final, clipped sentence wrapped in her new independence. I stood in the kitchen while she walked back to the couch, curled up with her phone like I didn't exist. She tapped on the screen, smirking at something, legs folded, wine glass on the armrest. Like she hadn't just broken something in me she couldn't see. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't a rough patch. This wasn't stress or burnout or hormones. This was it. She'd made the choice already, maybe weeks ago, maybe months. I just hadn't caught up yet. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, got it, and walked upstairs. I lay in bed beside her that night, both of us facing opposite walls. Her screen flickered across the ceiling while I stared into the dark. And I wasn't angry. Not exactly. I was quiet, calculating. That was the night I decided to disappear. Not physically, not yet. That would come later. No, this was the first step of the exit. The kind that happens so slowly, so methodically, they don't even realize they're being left behind. I stopped filling in the blanks she left. No more, how was your day? No more surprise coffee runs. No more covering her share of the housework while she recharged. I went silent. And the silence didn't register. Not right away. She was used to my consistency, my effort, my steadiness. So when I stopped trying, she assumed it was temporary, that I'd bounce back like I always did. But this time I didn't, because something had shifted. Something she couldn't undo with a smile or a touch or a sudden burst of kindness. I wasn't looking for comfort anymore. I was watching her, observing, learning what life looked like when her happiness was her job, not mine. She wanted emotional independence. She was about to get it in full. The next morning, she made herself a smoothie. Just one. Didn't offer me anything. I sat on the patio, drinking black coffee and reading the news. She waved from the kitchen window, then turned away. I didn't wave back. She didn't notice. She thought she'd freed herself from obligation. What she didn't know? She'd just started my quiet liberation. And when I was done, there wouldn't be a fight. There wouldn't be a dramatic ending. There'd be an empty space where I used to be. A silence she wouldn't know how to live with. The first time she noticed something was off, she didn't say it directly. She just stood in the hallway one morning, coffee mug in hand, and stared at me a little too long. Not lovingly, not even curiously, just confused. I was tying my shoes, about to head out early. No reason, really. I just didn't want to share a kitchen with someone who made me feel like a service provider with no emotional invoice. You're up early, she said. I nodded. Yeah, that was it. She waited. I didn't offer anything else. She sipped her coffee, lingered for another second, then went back to scrolling through her phone. Just like that, silence restored. But it was a different kind of silence now. I stopped orbiting her. Stopped checking in. I didn't ask if she needed anything before I left for work. Didn't text during lunch. Didn't ask what time she'd be home. And for a while, she didn't care. At least, she pretended not to. The first week went by like that. Stillness. I moved through the house like a polite stranger. Dishes done, trash out, chores handled. But without the warmth. Without the invisible glue I used to pour into every corner just to keep things functioning. Then one night, she walked into the living room dressed up more than usual. Hair done. Makeup. Tight jeans she hadn't worn in a year. No explanation. She sat across from me, waiting. I didn't ask where she was going. She shifted in her seat. Adjusted her top. Waited for me to notice. Compliment. Question. Nothing came. I stayed glued to the page in my book like she wasn't even there. Eventually, she muttered, I'm going out. I nodded. Okay. The door closed harder than it needed to. That was her first attempt. A probe. A test. And I failed it spectacularly, by not reacting at all. What she didn't understand was that I had already left emotionally. That I was no longer in the arena trying to earn back her attention, her intimacy, her crumbs of affection. I had switched roles without telling her. I was now the observer, and she was the one performing. The next morning, she made pancakes. From scratch. Even used that syrup I liked. The one she used to complain was too expensive for something so basic. She set a plate in front of me like nothing had changed. I said, "Thanks," ate 2 bites, then got up and grabbed my gym bag. She blinked. "You're not eating?" I shrugged. "Not hungry." I left before she could say anything else. In the gym parking lot, I sat for 10 minutes before walking in, not because I was tired, but because I needed the silence. The detachment. I wasn't running from her. I was remembering who I was before I wrapped my identity around her approval. And in that stillness, I found something dangerous. Clarity. She used to think she could take space whenever she needed, and I'd just be there. Loyal, soft, reliable. A man who would never turn cold. But cold was exactly what I was becoming. She hadn't noticed yet, but she would. Soon. 2 weeks in, the shift became undeniable. Not just to her, but to people around us. Friends. Family. Even coworkers who used to hear me mention her name in passing now noticed the absence. And yet, she still couldn't name it. She thought we were fine. Maybe a little distance. Maybe I was going through something. But she believed, deep down, that I was still orbiting her. Just spinning a little further than usual. Until the silence stopped being background noise and started becoming the atmosphere. She came home one night with takeout, the kind I used to like. The kind she usually forgot I even had a preference for. She set the bag down with this practiced casualness. Like nothing was broken. Like we were still we. I thanked her, but didn't sit with her. I took my box to the patio and ate outside. No music. No scrolling. Just the wind and the sound of plastic forks scraping styrofoam. She stood at the window and watched me for a moment. She didn't say anything. But that was the first visible crack. That weekend, she asked if I wanted to go to her friend's birthday. I declined. No excuse. Just a simple, "I've got things to do." She looked stunned, as if I'd broken protocol. I used to go to those things, even when I hated them. I used to smile for her, for appearances. Now, I didn't know her appearances. That same night, she texted me from across the house. A selfie. No caption. Just her in that dress she knew I liked. I stared at it for a second, then locked my phone. No response. No reaction. Let her wonder. Let her scroll through her own silence. I started leaving earlier for work. Coming home later. Picking up extra hours. Volunteering for things I used to avoid. Not because I needed to, but because I finally realized I didn't need her validation to fill my time. One afternoon, a friend of hers, Amanda, I think, stopped me in the grocery store. Asked if everything was okay at home. Said my wife seemed off lately. I smiled. "You should ask her." Amanda blinked. Confused. Curious. I kept walking. That night, my wife sat across from me on the couch, pretending to watch a show. I could feel her glancing sideways every few minutes, looking for signs of life. I didn't give her any. I was present, but absent. There, but unreachable. And the longer I stayed like that, the more unsettled she became. She started offering things I never asked for. Making my favorite meals. Sending good morning texts. Mentioning old memories like we were still building new ones. But none of it landed. Because she hadn't realized the most important part yet. I wasn't waiting for her to change. I wasn't hoping for a fix. I was documenting the fall. Quietly, precisely. Like an architect studying a building collapse. Not trying to stop it. Just understanding how it failed. And soon, she would realize. I hadn't just stepped back emotionally. I'd started pulling bricks from the foundation. One by one. The first time I let her calls go to voicemail, I was parked outside the gym, just staring at my own reflection in the dark screen of the dashboard. It wasn't a protest. It wasn't a strategy. It was instinct. The moment I realized I didn't owe her my time on demand anymore. I watched the phone buzz once. Then again. Then stop. A minute later, a text. "Everything okay?" I didn't answer right away. I went in. Trained harder than I had in years. Every rep felt like a purge. Not of anger. Not of sadness. But of history. Every time I'd bent myself trying to be enough for someone who decided she didn't owe me joy. When I came home, she was on the couch waiting. Hair done. Makeup subtle. A candle lit. An arrangement. Not a moment. She looked up, surprised. "You didn't answer." I was busy. There was a pause. The silence dragged longer than usual. I was worried. I nodded, then walked past her, straight upstairs. That night, I began the next phase. The cutoff. She didn't know it, but I had already rerouted part of my paycheck into a separate account. Clean. Private. No shared access. I canceled a few things, too. Apps, streaming subscriptions, a couple of auto payments linked to our joint card. Nothing she'd notice right away, but the signal was sent. I was building a version of my life that didn't include her. Quietly, like a surgeon separating vital organs. She still hadn't figured out the weight of what was happening. Not really. She still thought the right outfit, the right tone, the right night might bring me back into her gravitational field. But I wasn't floating anymore. I was grounded, anchored in detachment. The next week, I started getting up even earlier. She'd wake up to an empty bed, the smell of fresh coffee, just one cup, lingering like a ghost. She began asking more questions. Harmless ones. Innocent, even. You've been up early a lot. Yeah. Going somewhere. Gym. Coffee. Air. Each answer was true. And yet, none of it gave her what she was really asking. Are you still mine? One morning, I came back to find her in the kitchen, scrolling her phone. The same passive smirk she always wore when pretending not to care. But this time, she looked up and actually studied me. Not with affection, but uncertainty. You've been different lately. Have I? You used to. I don't know. Talk more. I sipped my coffee. Let the silence answer. Later that day, she posted a story on Instagram. A quote card about choosing peace over performing. The irony stung. She was still trying to control the narrative. Still performing for a digital audience while the real story was happening in the stillness between our conversations. But something inside her had shifted too. For the first time, she looked unsure. And I had no intention of giving her clarity. Because confusion was the first real consequence she'd felt in years. And it was just beginning. The power shift wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with a door slam or a screaming match. It came in quiet adjustments. Subtle moves. The kind that don't get noticed, until the stability they relied on suddenly vanishes. I started with the finances. She had always treated our shared money like it was a running faucet. Always flowing. Always available. She never asked how bills were paid, how much groceries cost, or who handled our taxes. I had been that faucet. So I turned the valve. Subscriptions canceled. Memberships ended. Her favorite skincare box stopped arriving. When she called the company, she was told the billing card had been removed. I said nothing. She checked the account, or tried to. The password had changed. I watched her one evening from the hallway as she sat on the couch, laptop open, refreshing the login page like it might unlock on pity. I didn't say a word. Just let her sit in the discomfort. Control wasn't about yelling. It was about removal. She wanted to operate independently, so I gave her exactly that. A world where she had to manage things on her own. She told her friends she was rebalancing the relationship, but she didn't know I was rebalancing the infrastructure. Next, I updated all the beneficiary info on my accounts, removed her name, moved my emergency contacts to my brother and an old college friend. I didn't need to tell her. I wasn't asking for permission. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a quiet exit. The most ironic part? She still believed she had time, that I was sulking, processing, maybe even punishing her a little. But in her mind, there was still a path back. She still thought she could decide when to return to normal. She didn't understand that normal was already gone. I dismantled it piece by piece. One night, I walked in and found her sitting at the dining table, laptop open, spreadsheets on the screen. She looked up quickly, a little embarrassed, like I'd caught her cheating on a test. She asked if I could explain a couple of things, how the mortgage payment was processed, how auto payments were organized. I told her to call the bank. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She knew. Not the whole picture, but the outline. The feeling that something had slipped from her hands while she wasn't looking. That for the first time in years, she wasn't the one holding the thread. She was dangling from it. By the end of that week, I moved the last of my personal assets to a separate account, one she couldn't trace. I updated my address on certain documents, not because I'd moved out, but because I was already planning the life that came next. Without her, not in anger, in precision. And still, she smiled at me some mornings, as if we were just in a rough patch, as if time would soften me. as if she still had access to the version of me who fought for her attention. But she didn't know what I knew. That once a man learns to stop needing your happiness, he starts building without you. She liked being admired. That was always part of her identity, not just being in control, but being seen as someone who had it all together. Friends, image, curated brunch photos, compliments about our relationship from people who only saw what she wanted them to see. So when that started slipping, it hit harder than anything I could have said. It started with her sister. They were close. Weekly FaceTimes. Hour-long texts. But suddenly, her sister was texting me, asking if everything was okay. Said my wife seemed off. Snappy. Unsettled. I didn't explain. Just said I was doing fine. Nothing more. Then came the mutual friends. One of them cornered me at a birthday dinner. Said she'd seen my wife alone at a wine bar, venting to someone. Not angry. Not sad. Just scattered. She used to talk about how strong you were for her, she added. Now she barely mentions your name. I just smiled. People change. It was a quiet war she didn't know she was losing. Because I didn't confront her. I let her unravel in front of the very audience she spent years performing for. One night, she posted a story. A quote about how some people grow apart and it's okay. I didn't respond. But her best friend did. In my DMs, said she was confused. Said the energy felt weird lately. I kept it simple. Yeah, I've noticed that too. I watched it all from a distance. Her social glow dimming. Her image cracking under the weight of my absence. Because I wasn't the one explaining anymore. She was. And she didn't have the language for what was happening. Couldn't say, he just stopped. Couldn't say, he's still here, but he's gone. It made her spiral. Not loudly, but socially. People noticed. And for a woman who lived through validation, that silence was louder than any betrayal. By the third week, the house felt colder, not in temperature, but in presence. She still moved through the rooms like before, humming to herself in the mornings, making her protein shakes, scrolling Instagram with that practiced half-smile. But her confidence was slipping. You could see it in the details. She started trying harder, in small, nervous ways. Wearing perfume she hadn't touched in months. Leaving the bathroom door open when she used to lock it. Cooking more than necessary and leaving extra servings by accident. I never said a word. I took the food. Ate in silence. Cleaned up my plate. Never touched hers. The silence became unbearable, but only for her. I was already living in it. I began spending more time in the guest room, claiming it was for work calls. I'd shut the door and stay in there for hours, not really working. Just for claiming space. She knocked once, lightly. Asked if I wanted to watch something together. I said maybe later. Later never came. She stopped knocking. One night, I came home and found her in the living room, curled up on the couch in one of my old hoodies. The TV was on, volume low, some sitcom laugh track echoing into the stillness. She didn't look at me when I walked in. Just stayed there, waiting for something that wouldn't come. I walked past her, poured a glass of water, went upstairs. No tension. No drama. Just distance. The next morning, I noticed her at the sink, wiping down the counter in circles that never ended. A nervous tick. The kind people do when they're trying to feel in control of something. Anything. But control was gone. She hadn't just lost me emotionally. She was losing the illusion that I still needed her to function. That was the shift. She wasn't the center anymore. She wasn't even on the map. And for someone who built her self-worth on relevance, irrelevance was the one thing she couldn't survive. She waited until a Sunday morning. The kind of day we used to spend together, coffee, errands, small laughter between tasks. But this one was different. I came downstairs to find her waiting in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. She didn't start with accusations. Not even questions. Just silence. Waiting for me to speak. I didn't. She finally broke. Can we talk? I nodded once. Not yes. Not no. Just acknowledgement. She began slowly, the way people do when they're building a case they're not sure they'll win. Said she felt a disconnect. That she missed how things used to be. That she was trying. I listened. She said maybe we could reset. Go out to dinner. Take a weekend away. Just the two of us. I took a sip of coffee. She asked if I still loved her. I didn't answer. She looked at me for a long time, like she was trying to read a language she no longer understood. I just want to know where we stand, she said. I stood up, placed my mug in the sink. You're not going to say anything? I shook my head gently, not in defiance, in conclusion, because there was nothing left to say. She wasn't ready for that kind of silence. Not the angry kind, not the storm, but the final, still kind. The kind that follows the end of something that already died quietly. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. But her hands were trembling when she set the mug down. Later that evening, I heard her in the bathroom. The sound of her brushing her teeth, longer than necessary. Cabinet doors opening and closing. Like she was searching for control in the rituals. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Not with tension, with certainty. She had opened the door, hoping to walk back into the version of me she remembered. But I was already gone. What stood in front of her now was the shadow of a man who used to wait, explain, justify. Now, I just observed. Because the version of me she's trying to reach no longer lives here. The unraveling wasn't loud. It didn't come with a scream or a public scene. It came in whispers, awkward pauses, avoided eye contact in rooms where she used to be the center. Her friend group, once a circle of support, began drifting. They still smiled in photos, still tagged her occasionally, but the energy was different. They didn't invite her like before. Conversations got shorter. Replies came slower. One of them unfollowed her completely. She noticed. She tried harder. Posted more curated content. Quotes about growth. Solo selfies with captions about healing. But something was missing. People could feel it, even through the filter. Authenticity, or the lack of it. At work, things slipped. She missed a meeting. Fumbled a deadline. Her manager called it a rough patch. But her team had already begun whispering. She's distracted. She's not herself. She heard it. And every time she walked through the front door, hoping to find balance at home, there was just me. Calm. Silent. Focused on my own life. Not cold. Not cruel. Just elsewhere. She started staying up late, scrolling in the dark. I could hear the soft hum of her phone screen past midnight. Searching, refreshing, comparing. Watching others live what she couldn't hold together anymore. Then came the questions from family. Her mother called me, concerned. Said she hadn't been herself. Asked if everything was okay. I told her gently, you should talk to her. That silence echoed louder than an argument. She confronted me again that weekend. Asked why I wasn't trying. Why I didn't care anymore. I didn't defend myself. Because what she didn't realize, what she refused to accept, was that my absence wasn't emotional withdrawal. It was survival. I had lived too long in a house where love was conditional, effort was one-sided, and silence was weaponized. Now, I was using silence too. But not to punish. To free myself. And that's what broke her. Not the loss of me, but the loss of control. Because for the first time, she couldn't spin the narrative. People saw the cracks. And I never had to raise my voice to show them. I waited until a Thursday morning. She was still asleep when I closed the closet door for the last time. Everything I needed was already packed. Quiet. Minimal. Intentional. Just like my exit. The apartment was still. No sounds but the low hum of the fridge and the faint rustle of leaves outside the window. I stood there for a moment, not to say goodbye, just to confirm something. There was no weight in my chest. No guilt. No hesitation. Just air. The man who used to stay up late wondering how to fix things. He was gone. Now there was only me, present, focused, detached. I left my key on the kitchen counter. Not hidden. Not dramatic. Just placed. Visible enough to be noticed. I didn't leave a note. There was nothing left to explain. She'd understand the moment she saw the emptiness. The quiet. The missing jacket on the hook. The toothbrush gone. The absence of noise where I used to exist. I didn't take revenge. I didn't burn bridges. I just left. Not to hurt her, but to return to myself. I moved into a smaller place. One with fewer memories. No ghosts in the hallway. No tension thick in the air. Just space. Open, clean mind. I reconnected with people who hadn't seen me in months. I said yes to things I used to avoid. I spent long mornings in silence. Not because I was sad, but because I was free. And she called once. Then twice. Then stopped. I never answered. She sent one last message weeks later. Just one line. I didn't think you'd actually leave. I stared at it for a long time. Then deleted it. No anger. No response. Because she never believed silence could speak louder than a scream. But it did. She wanted closure. Words. Explanation. But all she got was absence. A silence so absolute, It echoed through everything she thought was permanent. And the last thing I left behind wasn't an argument. It was a sentence she'd hear every time the house got quiet. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.